Hello, everyone, and welcome to TCR Community Talks. I'm Josh, and we're going to be using this show once a month to learn about the setting of Bloodlines 2 and highlight the amazing creators in the World of Darkness community. Today, we're joined by writer Cherish Goldstraw.
Hi, I'm Cherish, and I am currently working on Bloodlines 2.
And we've also got Alfabusa and Speaker from the YouTube channel Brother Alfabusa.
Hello!
Hello!
Whoa!
Whoa!
Oh!
It's us!
It's us! We write Hunter the Parenting.
We do.
We also make Norfolk Wizard Game.
That is true.
And we also make various other animated projects on our channel, Brother Alfabusa, under the production name Ogre Popenang.
I can reaffirm this. Just to specify, for those unfamiliar with our voices, I am Alfabusa.
And I am Speaker D.
Yes.
Fantastic. And I think it would be an appropriate space to begin. How about you tell us how you got started making Hunter the Parenting? Because that was actually a project I was really excited and surprised to see appear on YouTube. Like when it very first began, it's an amazing animation. So yeah, how did that come about?
Well,
Yeah.
through a little bit of tragedy, but also, perhaps a little bit of providence. We had been making If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device, which was a very popular Warhammer 40,000 fan property. And unfortunately, possibly to jump on the streaming wave, possibly for other reasons, Games Workshop decided that after several years of us making this, that it was going to start cracking down on fan-created content. We didn't really like that very much, and with Alfabusa having just recently had children, more or less, we decided that maybe we should pivot our talents to somewhere else that we would feel more safe and secure working under. We shopped around a bit, and then I brought up the idea of World of Darkness, since it's something I'm very, very familiar with and I enjoy quite a bit. Everyone on the team most everyone on the team had at least some passing familiarity with Bloodlines and all that. And we wound up figuring that, hey, WoD Once Upon a Time, it was number 2 to D&D. It was one of the largest tabletop things that was out there, and it had such an expansive and incredible base of lore, so many different angles to attack it from. It just seemed ripe for a new series to be able to sort of bring to light, like we had once helped bring Warhammer to light.
It is also worth noting that we had worked with Paradox briefly in the past for a sponsored video. So we were familiar with them already as we went into this. And they had been very good to us. And they were exceptionally good to us with, and a special shout out to the World of Darkness team for just straight up, setting up a call and talking to us, still talking to us on the regular, which is, super alien for us.
Oh, yeah.
Completely. It feels, it's quite different from where we were at prior, which, of course, served to drag us in even further.
Yeah, it's nice to no longer feel like a bootlegger living out in the bayou, you know. It's lovely.
Yeah, and with that, and with of course V5 releasing and whatnot a few years prior as well. We felt there was a lot of space to go at this with, and I remember that being we kind of went with okay, so Paradox has been very good to us. Let's look at their stuff because they have a very good fan content policy. What do they have that interests us? And WoD was the thing that came out on top there because we were all familiar with it, and we were oh, this would be very cool to do something with. So let's look into doing that. And yeah, that's what we ended up doing. And it's been a lot of fun so far, honestly. It's been
Oh yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. Very refreshing in many, many ways. Very creatively liberating and whatnot.
Indeed.
Sweet. I think there's something that I particularly enjoy about Hunter the Parenting, but also I suppose, World of Darkness in general, which is that there is a lot of space for a variety of tones and characters that you can really make your own, and you certainly have. So I think it would be fascinating to hear from all of you how you have approached creating characters for Hunter Parenting, Bloodlines 2, and what is your how do you feel about your processes? That's a very open question, I realize. So
Yeah. Where should we go for? I feel like
Cherish, would you like to take the lead on this one?
yes, yeah. I was just
Oh.
about to say.
Yeah.
It's probably very different, actually. It's probably not very different. Because one of the things that I keep in mind, obviously, we're talking about when I create my characters, the main thing I'm looking at is what serves the overall story of the game. And we look at how they will fit into the story from the beginning. So, but I think that's not all that different from like when you are the storyteller in a tabletop game. And a lot of the things that I personally like to think about is how it feels to play a good tabletop game and how we bring that to the characters. I think there's always an element of you've got to make them fun to interact with, fun for the other players to interact with, not just for you to play as. And also, I think there's always an element of like trying to trip each other up, giving you self. It's one of the reasons why I like clans like Banu Hakim and things like that. And you can give them like limitations within your design of the character that then everyone else has to react to, and you have to react to yourself and challenge yourself in that way.
So you mean like Nico's particular style of truth telling?
Yeah, and I know some people are really gonna fucking hate that. Sorry, can I swear?
I mean, I'll just have to bleep it out. We'll find out.
This is a Christian stream, by God.
Like, we're definitely cutting that.
Sorry, I should cut your monetization. Yeah, sorry. So with the truth telling, for example, like I know some people are gonna hate that, and other people are not gonna hate that. They're gonna say, like, "Oh, this is a character I can manipulate," or "This is the kind of character that I would like to have in a tabletop game that a good storyteller is going to have so much fun with."
Oh, so you're like hoping that people will kind of take them to their table as well?
This is all in universe, isn't it?
Oh, good point. No, that's okay. I hadn't considered that.
Everything we do is canon.
I can't think of anything more canon than Hunter the Parenting.
Oh,
No, definitely. You heard it here first. So did we.
Oh, that's interesting. Though.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense from the perspective of, having to make things for the utility of the game.
Of course.
Yeah, to an extent, I think we do something similar. Though obviously we're not interactive in the same sense. Many of our fans, or many of the people that follow Hunter the Parenting, are going to be learning about these concepts like the Society of Leopold, the Arcanum, the clans, through different ways. They're going to be learning about them, for the first time. And in so doing, it's useful to have characters that not only are able to help represent strong facets of these organizations, but also to demonstrate that in the world of darkness, no one is really as one note as they might appear. Everyone is sort of much more grounded in their humanity. That's why in the first 3 episodes, we introduced a group of, Sabbat shovelheads, more or less. We call them the Licks. And each of them represent different parts of their clans and their organization as being a bunch of, blood crazy morons. But also, a lot of them have hidden depths. Our biker Bruja is easy to anger, but also very clearly comes from like a philosophical background, was clearly an educated person before they wound up in this place, and reacts much differently when compared to a character like Ape Boy, our gangrel, who's the youngest of the pack and was clearly jockeying for approval and acceptance within this new second life. Now, these are just 2 smaller characters, and spoilers, neither of them live for very long, but that's a purposeful choice that I think we try to put in whenever we can, to try to make sure that our viewers can understand these characters, understand where they come from, but also realize and recognize the humanity in each one.
Yeah, and with this at the same time, also how the world of darkness in and of itself, like with vampirism being an especially like primary factor there, also throwing a bit of a wrench in that humanity, perhaps leading them slightly astray from where they otherwise would have been, of course. And how that like of course the thematics of each and every single game line is focused on how things have gone wrong for them. Essentially, that's a big like important part of it's a big important thing to also introduce and keep in mind as we create all of these characters. Like
Yeah.
why are they like this now? And this goes for our main characters as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single sub-organization within the world of darkness that is currently at a state where they're like, everything's fantastic. No, we're actually doing quite well for ourselves. I think there's maybe a few werewolf villains, but outside of that,
Oh yeah, as they tell themselves.
Yeah,
naturally.
yeah.
Things are going great.
and then they get mauled by a glasswalker. You know how it goes.
Happens all the time. No, but I think you brought up a really good point, which is that when you're making a game or a show, there will be people that are arriving to the universe for the first time, and while there's a lot of depth to share with them, you have to kind of put the stepping stones for people into there. And yeah, I suppose how have you dealt with that?
That is such a difficult thing.
Yeah.
Particularly for, I'm sure it's the same for you folks as well, in Bloodlines 2, because there are people that are so into the franchise, but we also don't want to alienate people that aren't. So you've got to, I think for me, it's more of a case of, the old thing of showing, not telling with things, and just seeding just enough lore so that the person that's got that kind of personality where they like looking into stuff is going to go off and Google it and learn and then get into it, and then it's going to be their next hyperfixation.
Yeah. I think like the world of darkness is like a world of like secrets and mystery as well. Like the intrigue and learning these like secret things is kind of like part of it, right? So I think usually, honestly, it can be fairly easy in many regards because you often start up, like you start off as like when you're getting into like a game of vampire, you start off as someone who, just like yourself, has no clue about anything that's going on in this world. And as you kind of like go through your chronicle, you start learning how these things function, especially if you have like players that follow you that are more learned. I feel like this was a thing that LA by Night did pretty well, actually.
I agree with that,
As a
yeah.
good example. And this is something that we also kind of want to do with our hunters, in that we kind of like start off with our character Boy, who has obviously lived in a family of hunters, but this is his first proper hunt in the first episode. And we, from the beginning, we decided that okay, we're not gonna talk at all about what these characters are doing out here. We're just gonna show you what happens when they walk out in some well, I was gonna say forest. It was initially a forest, but then we realized that England doesn't have forests anymore, kind of. So it's like a meadow, or no, not a meadow. What do they call it? A shrub, a shrubbery. Shrubbery. No, that's not it.
Some arboreal area.
Yeah. Some small area of woodland where they pass through, and then they find this cave, and then they head down this cave, and like, what are they even doing out here? Like they're doing something for sure. And then suddenly a vampire pops up. And then it becomes more obvious, like, what's going on here. And then we go on to episode 2, and that's where the lore dumping starts happening, where we establish, vaguely, like, through our hunter characters who are more ignorant of what's going on in this world, like, okay, we start talking about vampire society, like they're politicking through a very biased lens, because you can never get a non-biased lens from an in-universe perspective, which I think is good. I think that's like a very important part of like presenting the setting.
I think another element of this is also
Yeah.
learning when and when not to pay service to the proper nouns. There are many proper nouns in World of Darkness. We have the Camarilla, the Anarchs, the Bruja, the whatever, and those are great, and they help codify identities and clans
And
and all
gameplay.
that, and gameplay especially. But also, probably they're not necessarily universal, and when you come to apply them in all like circumstances where it can be applied, I feel like you can sometimes unwittingly take the mystery out of things, or put an entire subcategory of people in a box. So sometimes it's important not to say, "Oh, this is a Bruja vampire." Sometimes it's better to say, "This vampire just ripped this guy apart. What the hell is happening?"
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
What do you think is the key to these great characters that you're working? I suppose all of you are actively working on these characters right now. So yeah, how does that feel?
Good. I think that with it's all right, Tar. Yeah, I think that one of the good things that makes like a good vampire character, and it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, in terms of like looking at humanity and there being more depth to being more than just an evil creature. One of the things we always think about is even if it's not touched on in the game, every character has to have a backstory. When were they embraced? Was it consensual? Did they ask to be embraced? Where was it? And how does this, who they were as a mortal, how does that impact what they are now as a vampire? Along with all the other things that adds to that complexity, like what clan are they? Why did their sire choose them? Why did their sire think that that mortal was a good fit for their clan? And that all kind of brings out these kind of, like we're saying, these complex characters that are never just an archetype of the clan or what a vampire is or a scary monster.
Interesting. Do you have this for most of your characters?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, all
Straight
of
up
them.
all of them?
If there's a vampire in the game, we know who they are when they were embraced, what happened.
Oh wow. Okay, all right. That's impressive actually.
Why, thank you. What about you?
Well, I mean, we don't know who embraced Ape Boy.
I guess that now it is a bit of a mystery for
Yeah.
some, but for others though, I think what the key to making these characters really resonant is, in part, yeah, that aspect of humanity, but also making sure that these characters are, I think, alive. They feel living and breathing. Because that's what World of Darkness is at its best. It's when you're in this dark, insane, absurd world full of these horrible, like, weaving agendas of 8 quadrillion-year-old, like, British aristocrat, like, vampire bloodsucker, like, secretly running your entire society. And oh my god. And yet at the same time, you go to the corner store, you buy your cigarettes, it's like the real quote unquote world has to exist on top of that. Indeed, it has to exist in such weight to keep the supernatural needing to stay within its shadows. So, to me, one of the great ways in which we make characters is by that consideration of just how they fit into the world, how they are realized, where they come from, yes, their utility in the story, yes, but also making sure that no matter how absurd or how short-lived they may be, they feel authentic to the setting.
Yeah, where do they place in the real world, in the socio-political climate of 2006
Yes.
in Britain, and where they like having at least a vague idea of what their lives were like before all of this went down, where they're at now, and what happened to change everything.
Yeah.
Because this isn't only a thing for vampires. This is a thing for, like, in 5th edition, it's the case for every single game line so far: hunter, vampire, and werewolf. Every single one has some kind of past, a turning point, and then a present. And those 3 blocks are always important for every single character.
It's a really obviously a grim place to be, and Bloodlines in Seattle is unpleasant to say the least, for those unlucky few either being turned into or fed on vampires. But imagine you can't purely rely on grim horror all the time. And obviously, there's a lot of levity in Hunter the Parenting and Norfolk Wizard game. And yeah, I was wondering how you thought about how and when to place those slightly either happier or lighter or humorous moments.
Good question.
I think potentially we could start this as being the more decidedly comedic show. Certainly, there is a strong element of elevated humor in Hunter the Parenting that maybe isn't as typical in most World of Darkness products. You know, it's rare that you're going to find your main character eschewing the virtues of drinking unpasteurized milk. Whatever just dumb swamp sludge bullshit we managed to conjure. But at the same time, I think that people miscalculate when they assume that the world of darkness is such a dark and serious world, and it's real, and let me tell you, you are the vampire and you are the blood. It's like you're full of shit. That's not true at all. The world of darkness is hilarious. Have you read a book? Have you read any of it? I mean, even you can point to all the old lore, but even in the new lore, it's like at the end of the day, society is being run by out of touch. Vampire society is being run by, at best, a bunch of countercultural protesters from decades past that are going to be half out of touch with the way that things are going.
They don't know how phones work.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the Camarilla, you're being run by a bunch of 13th century aristocrats that barely they don't understand how an iPad works and all that stuff.
Never.
And building out from that, the real world is darker than anything we can ascribe to a page. It is more senseless and violent than I think anything that a writer can encapsulate. And at the same time, it's funnier than anything that a writer can encapsulate. I think that embracing the breadth of tone of the world of darkness, which is elevated by its mere presence, it is a supernatural world. And with supernatural powers and supernatural influence, I think comes supernatural idiocy. And we see that in Bloodlines 1. Really, which is a tremendously funny game, and I hope Bloodlines 2 is as funny. Where you have signs for the baby sale littered all around LA, and Prince LaCroix is essentially not respected by anyone in the city. The more you peel back, the weave behind it, you have all those lovely radio ads. The first thing you see on your computer is an advert for penis enlargement pills. So
this is just real life. This is what happens in real life.
The world of darkness to me is a slightly more dilapidated real world with some supernatural creatures brewing beneath the surface. And I think any writer would be a fool not to tap onto that and to realize that, even if they don't do it to the extent of HDP.
Of course.
It's also the nature of tabletop games. You're going to laugh with your friends.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a very beautiful way of putting it. That the real world is like that. Yeah, I agree, and I think that I think that the concept of vampires is inherently quite funny.
Yes.
I'm not dead, but I can't go out in the sun anymore, and I have to drink blood. And it's like you've got eternal life, but it sucks, and that wasn't fun, but you can take it. So it's like,
oh, these poor people.
Yeah, and I think it's a natural fit, and I think that that's part of the reasons why we have it in this as well, is because there's a reason that horror movies are short. It's because you can't keep someone scared for 3 hours straight. So we break it up with humor, with something else. You become desensitized pretty quickly. And I think particularly with a video game that has to be a bit longer, it makes sense for us to use what's already there with the inherently funny idea that vampires is quite a funny concept, and for also all the reasons that you were saying, that someone that is old and out of touch and still going around and hasn't really kept up with new technologies in the same way that older humans don't.
Yeah. This is literally our main character, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing what that entails, honestly.
Yeah, when you have a main character that doesn't quite recognize a modest proposal as satire, I think the doors open up to all kinds of emergent gameplay. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have fire catching up on however many hundreds of years of media.
Oh, he's gonna love Skibbity Toilet. Yeah, it's gonna be great. I expect an entire side quest about this. Yeah, pick that up the cutting room floor. Get it syndicated. Chop chop. Okay. Appreciate it.
That's when Fire's going to be really relatable. That we're all like,
Fire their own personal TikTok.
Oh wow.
Oh no.
Oh,
Don't know if you want that. The dancing, it will, yeah.
you have to get on that.
Yeah, that's true. I've got a lot of TikToks to make. So in real life today, we've announced some of the Anarch and Unbound characters in a dev diary. We also talked about a bunch of the Camarilla characters that you're going to meet, and I suppose, yeah. How do you think it might be a bit difficult for Hunter the Parenting and Norfolk Wizard game, but for Bloodlines, how have you been thinking about the Anarchs and the Camarilla?
I really enjoy writing these actually because they're obviously two completely different schools of thought, and it's that's politics, right? That's the vampire politics. It's two different schools of thoughts. They're both reacting to a change, very much the Thin Bloods. Have we announced that we've got Thin Bloods yet? I can say that, right?
There are Thin Bloods in the game.
Well,
yes.
okay. I'm not letting anything go. Okay, yes, they're reacting to the social catalyst that is the Thin Bloods, but also they're not a monolith. Neither faction is a monolith, and we have all these different ways of the way that all the individual vampires within each thing want to deal with things. Particularly within the Camarilla, you've got ones that are like, right, we have got to, squash down this Thin Blood thing. We have got to deal with these annex. And then you've got others that are like, it's not really on the radar. Like, I have more important things to deal with, like myself. So, and that's what's really fun and kind of interesting to play with, and how characters from both factions react to the changes that happens politically throughout the game.
Sorry, may I ask,
Yes.
real quick? You can tell me off if I'm not allowed to ask. Did you say that are these Thin Bloods? Are they part of the Anarchs, or are they their own third faction, or?
Oh, you go for it, Josh. Go.
Can I
Yeah.
say?
Well, I mean that's part of what the dev diary deals with. So go for it.
Oh.
Okay, cool. Okay. Yep. So the Thin Bloods are. There seems to be an unusually high number of Thin Bloods in Seattle for some reason that you may find out through gameplay. The Thin Bloods are naturally tending towards the Anarch side of things because they're the underclass. They're treated badly. The Camarilla oppresses them.
Yeah, they want
so
them down for religious reasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, not confirmed.
Who knows? And so we have and again, the Camarilla aren't a monolith either. So there's the ones that think that Thin Bloods are just, yes, it might be religious reasons, or they might just think that they're scummy and above it, or they might just think that they're an underclass that you can oppress because, they're Thin Bloods.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some interesting things to explore there.
Yeah, and like you said, they're not a monolith, especially with how the Anarchs are in game. They're kind of fractured. So while you'll meet some and you'll be able to treat with some of them, there's not. They don't all listen to one leader. It's not a unified faction, as it were. So that will come into play as well.
Do they all listen to one stereo, like in the previous Bloodlines, where they all sat on the beach all the time?
Yeah. Tell us about some of your favorite characters and how they'll appear. Should we start with Cherish? Let's go Bloodlines.
Okay. One of my favorite characters, right? One of the first characters I actually wrote was Nyx, and she's a gangrel. So she was really, really fun to write. And she kind of comes into Seattle, and it's sort of, and she's unbound. When we were talking before about this conflict between the Camarilla and the Anarchs, and this sort of bubbling tension that's going on. She's unbound, so she's not loyal to anybody. And there's this kind of question that the characters ask, and I'm certainly hope the players ask, is like, why would a gangrel come to a city? They don't normally do that. So she has some kind of ulterior motive. And so I guess it's down to you whether or not you trust her. It seems that the Camarilla want her on their side, which makes sense because a leashed gangrel is a mighty fine proposition. Um, but what is her ulterior motive? Why is she here? And that's something that was really interesting to kind of put together, how she fits into the story, how she serves the game, but also how much or how little we decide to tell the players, and how much we sort of hide in the game, where you've got to dig to find it.
Yeah, like hidden motivations is a little bit of a theme of things we play with in the story, right?
Yeah, a whole lot. You can't trust anybody. It's one of the things that we talk about quite a lot, is that you can't have friends. And it's something that naturally as a writer, you find yourself starting to do. You're like, oh, this character is friends with this one. And you can't do that because they're vampires. And it's like, no, they can't have friends. You can have allies, and you can have allies that you like more than others, but you can't really trust anybody. Everyone is out for themselves. And then I've been really lucky that I've been able to work into some of the trainer characters and the characters that you get to have a lot of relationship building with, and going into multiple choices and trying to get them on your side, trying to get information out of them, things like that. So the tools, Sarah did a really good dev diary about our dialogue system, Inc. It goes into a lot of detail about how that system was developed. And I think that's one of the things that sets games writing apart from other mediums, is because it is all about, like, well, first of all, you don't have a protagonist really. That's the player. um, so it's interesting in that way. And then it's this sort of like holding on to all these many threads of dialogue and conversation, um, and how you can guide the player through to still get key information through to them that they need to progress the game, um, but still always have this system that respects what they've done and the choices they've made and the way that other characters feel about them. I've grown to love Ink. I found it difficult at first, but now it's like I have powers now. Like, I can do things with this script that requires no code to come in and help me. I can just code it in, I can put it in Ink, and then, someone will call you a swear word later on because you said something 6 scenes ago that pissed them off. And that's great. That's the power you want. Yeah, if you are interested in that kind of thing, I would recommend Sarah's Dev Diary. She goes in, it's really, really good.
Yeah, I suppose. What tools? What's your process for making an animation? I suppose there's like a lot of different things. You got to send voice actors things. You've got to coordinate.
So it's a whole flow chart in and of itself. We usually start off with just, someone coming up with some ideas for a potential script, or us, discussing back and forth what we want to do in the future. Sometimes we write it down in the plot Bible. Sometimes we just, entirely kind of skip that step. Then we start writing a script skeleton, which is just a rough draft of everything we want or need to happen in a script. Then we start writing the script in and of itself, and then we go through script edit and script edit and script edit, draft upon draft upon draft, until we're at a point where we're like, okay, I think we've gone long enough with this. Let's send it out to voice actors. Then we schedule time with voice actors. We start recording all of their lines individually. We don't do like everyone in the same room kind of deal most often. Then when we have gathered at least most of the voice lines, we start putting stuff together in our audio program. We use both a program called Reaper, and we also use Vegas, Vegas 20, because we've been using it for like 10 plus years, so we know it inside and out, even though it's a bit rudimentary, but it works really well as a basic audio editing program. Then we move on to the animation. When we have placed all of the, like, at the very least, placed all of the voice lines, in the audio file, we can render it out, and then we can start animating. And that we use After Effects for, Adobe After Effects primarily. And we of course also use a lot of like Photoshop files, PSDs of characters with a lot of different like limbs. They have like one layer is like an eyeball, one layer is a head, one layer is a torso, and then we just animate them kind of like what do you call them, puppets?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, very much a motion comic-y sort of paper puppets.
Oh yeah, for sure, very motion comic inspired. And yeah, with that we also draw what we actually internally call panels, which are just, drawn individual frames and scenes that we animate for that particular scene.
Essentially, yeah, the blocking gets turned into thumbnails, the thumbnails get turned into individual animated panels, and then
Yeah.
all of the great wizards with their pens and pencils make our silly words into something really fantastic to look at.
Of course, we also mostly use a storyboard for our illustrators
That's it.
when they draw these panels as well.
That's
of
the
course.
word. I said thumbnails instead of storyboard.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no. And then, of course, we move into post and we do like subtitles and we do like extra audio editing work. And then it's render hell for the next, at least 24 hours. But
Huge.
often a lot longer than that.
And through this fine-tuned process, you get a product within 3 to 6 months. So hopefully.
hopefully, yeah. It's, the longer the project, the more time it takes. But then we also have, the audio logs, which have been very popular for us as well, which are primarily focused on just the audio aspect. We do have visual accompaniment with subtitles and whatnot. But it's mostly the writing and the voice work, like by Speaker D here, who does Big D.
I do Big D. I do
Yeah,
many
he
such
does an
characters.
exceptionally good job.
Why, thank you.
And for those, it takes a lot less time because you cut out the entire animation process there, which is the thing that naturally takes the most time. Even if the animation is very rudimentary, there is a reason why animation is so incredibly expensive and time consuming. Which we have learned. We are like the bottom barrel scrapings of the animation industry in that sense. But we managed to
wouldn't
make
say
it work.
that.
I like to think of us as fish crawling out of the ocean and learning to breathe air.
But with animation. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
So-
it's much prettier than the other metaphor.
So what is it about this franchise? What is it about the World of Darkness? Because this is a huge amount of work you're talking about here.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that kind of like? Is it because you find it creatively inspiring? What is it about it that makes you think, do you know what? I really want to tell stories about this.
Yeah,
It is the creatively inspiring part, I would say, probably.
It is such a interesting setting. It's an underserved setting too.
This is true.
For so long, World of Darkness has been like this bright gem to me. It's, to me, one of the most interesting lattice works of setting concepts and gameplay that you can ask for. It is a modern fantasy that, to me, is done correctly, with the modern upfront, the fantasy hiding in the shadows, still present, still dominant, still perhaps even pulling the strings, but it is very much grounded with that connection with the real world. There's a reason why World of Darkness has that reputation as being the thespian's role-playing game, or the role-player's role-playing game. And that's because of all of the systems I've played, and I've played very many, there are few that I feel like I have had such wonderful and immersive experiences with than the World of Darkness. And from within that framework, you have so much freedom to work. You have so many different ways that you can tear apart and examine not just these crazy elevated ideas, but like the human condition. Metaphors become real. They become things that you can directly inhabit. You know, monster theory is the idea that each monster that you might see in a horror movie, right, represents something. With the xenomorph from Alien, it's exploitation. That's why you have the trapping of capitalism everywhere. It literally impregnates and honestly rapes its victims to creating its own birth. It is the ultimate reflection of predation. You have that level of depth that you can get into not only for the enemies of your world, but also the heroes, quote unquote, your protagonists. You have that level of analysis and living flesh that you can apply to your stories. That's what I love about WoD. I love that you can do almost any tone with it. And most of all, I love that it's darkly reflective of the own absurd times we live in.
Yes.
Sometimes it feels like it's a mighty compelling explanation, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, unfortunately, our explanations are much more mundane and less exciting. The best you'll get is maybe like, oh yeah, maybe there's like some cult somewhere doing something. But, at World of Darkness, you get to put a face onto almost an anthropomorphic personification of the decay of the 21st century. And that is the best way, I think, to look and ascribe WoD. And you can be a garbage man, and you can fight like vampires and werewolves and all that stuff. And
That's true.
You could choose to engage with it in that aspect. You can say, "I'm glad, I'm a hunter. All right, let's go," and then you engage with it from that standpoint. That's equally rewarding in its own way.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to bring up your Norfolk Mage game. Norfolk Wizard game.
Of course.
The Wizard game.
The Wizard game.
Good name, right?
Yeah, controversial to some Alfabusa. Some people didn't like it. Well, yeah, absolutely. What do you want to know about it?
Well, just kind of tell us about it. It's your most recent production, and it must feel quite exciting and fresh for you.
Oh, it is, and it's also terrifying. For
perhaps.
me exclusively. Anytime you release Norfolk Wizard game, I'm always like, this is it. This is the one. This is when everyone figures out that I'm a fraud. I'm lying. I have to skip town. I have to change my name. But in reality, Norfolk Wizard game is really, I think, one of the most fun projects we've had. It is an actual play, yes, but it's not streamed like many of them. And it's rather soundly edited. And that is, in some ways, maybe can instill a sense of artificiality to it by an outside observer. But I think what's really lovely about it is that we are able to take the actual play elements, the things that really work about it, the fact that it's an authentic experience with people at a table, the ups and downs of an average game of World of Darkness. And we're able to take that, and then we're able to sort of animate it and give it even more life. Outside of that, we're able
elevate
to
it a bit.
Elevate it.
More immersive experience.
More accessible, I think, to people that don't necessarily want to sit down and watch like four people at a table.
We have had a lot of like compliments in regards to the accessibility aspect of like a lot of people can't really concentrate super well when there isn't like sound effects to help out, say. And that is something that we really gone ham on, like a lot. In part because I just really, really like doing that kind of sound work for it, in truth. But it becomes more like a gateway, I suppose, for a lot of people who, want to get in on the actual play scene, but don't even really know how to start processing it as a format.
One thing that's really important to me about Norfolk Wizard game, and I mean, my favorite of all the WoD sublines in the past has always been the mage one. I feel like mages, more than anyone else, save for perhaps hunters, have access to the widest bevy that World of Darkness can enjoy. Whereas other games ask you, how will you survive? Mage puts you in a position where it's like, okay, do better. Can you? Can you live with what better is? What is better, really? And it forces you to ask these great questions. It's always had this lovely lattice work of lore that I've adored, but it's never been particularly accessible because it's non-Vancian magic for the most part. It's what can you do as a mage? Anything. Oh God, how do you make a game like that? It blows up your brain. I want to try to make through Norfolk Wizard game and through the players at my table who are my favorite players I've had. They're like the best players you could ask for. Make that world accessible to people, as well as hopefully an actual play accessible to people. I want people to see the wonderful madness of this crazy setting and to enjoy it and to indulge in it, to have these characters go on these mind-bending, deeply personal journeys and high stakes, almost philosophical conflicts within a rapidly decaying and melting world. Have a lot of laughs, have a lot of jokes, have a great time doing it, but bring what has always been my home experience with this wonderful property to everybody, and in some ways perhaps awaken them to a new way of thinking.
Fantastic. All right. I mean, where can we find this? Many shows of yours.
Well, you can find this and many other shows of ours on Brother Alfabusa's YouTube channel. You can additionally find episodes of the Norfolk Wizard game on Spotify. And you can also find us... where else can you also find us, Alpha?
I don't know if you should plug our Patreon here. It feels a bit gauche.
And be sure to follow our Patreon at patreon.com/
There you go.
Alfabusa, where you can not only help support us and our various mad endeavors, but also get access to sneak peeks of exclusive content that you can look at without even subscribing or paying a dime.
Well, yeah, this is true.
Yeah,
we
in a
don't
past life,
paywall stuff.
in a past life, I think it was like a carnival barker or something. I don't know. I just have this intrinsic urge to sell out. I don't know. I don't get it.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for watching. Hopefully you'll be able to join us next month. Thank you so much to Alfabusa, Speaker. You've been wonderful guests and so enlightening, and your enthusiasm is infectious.
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Love it.
Yeah, we're grateful for you having us.
Yeah,
It's lovely.
Very
lovely.
much so. Very exciting.
Not at all, not at all. All right, until next time, goodbye everyone.